Welcome to Roughing It with Ruth, the channel where everything is a bit rough around the edges. This video was actually requested by somebody asking that I make a video discussing what I have in my backpack during a backpacking trip, as well as what I wear during a backpacking trip. I'm going to try and talk about each item fairly quickly, just so that this video doesn't end up being like 20 minutes long. But what I am going to do is, wherever I can, I'm going to try and give a budget option for that particular gear item. There's quite a bit to get through, so we'll just start right away with the clothing that I wear during a hike. I always wear a hat. I've tried various different styles, like full brim hats, but my preferred type of hat at the moment is a peak cap, just a regular cap. Then, as you can see, I also have a buff on at the moment. This is my preferred method of wearing a buff when the weather is kind of cold. It protects my ears and my neck quite well, and if it gets really cold, I can actually pull it up over my nose and mouth. When the weather is warmer, I probably won't be wearing the buff at all, but you can also just roll it down onto your neck to allow a bit of venting. The next item of clothing that you can see is my down jacket. This particular down jacket is from Kway, which is the Cape Union Mart brand of clothing. Down jackets can be really expensive, even if you do find them on sale, but I have tried out a synthetic puffy jacket. This synthetic puffy jacket kept me warm on the escarpment of the Drakensberg, and it only cost 200 Rand from Mr. Price. It's obviously not quite as warm as the down jacket, but that's mostly because the torso is a bit shorter, so it doesn't cover as much of my bum as the down jacket does. The next item of clothing that I'm wearing is a long-sleeved technical shirt. This long-sleeved technical shirt is also going to double as my sleep layer at night. If I am going to be encountering particularly cold conditions, I might switch out this technical long-sleeved layer for a long-sleeved fleece layer. Underneath that, I have a technical t-shirt. This is not a particularly expensive technical t-shirt. In fact, it was the t-shirt that I bought for my budget backpacking project. It comes from Mr. Price Sport. It's the Maxed brand, I believe. And it is part polyester and part elastine, but it's super comfortable. My advice with the t-shirt that you're going to be wearing to hike in is definitely don't go for cotton, because not only will it not dry fast if it gets wet, but your own sweat is going to make it wet really quickly, and it's going to keep you cold as well. Then right at the bottom layer underneath this t-shirt, I am wearing a very simple sports bra. It's really nothing fancy. It also comes from Mr. Price Sport, and the only thing that I can say about sports bras is just try to find one that is really comfortable for you. Definitely test it out before you go on your backpacking trip. What I've discovered is that if I wear my sports bras inside out, then wherever the seams are doesn't actually cause irritation because it's not touching my skin. So these are the pants that I hike in. They are the Arc'teryx brand of pants. And unfortunately, the Arc'teryx brand of pants are extremely, extremely expensive, and they're also not available in South Africa. So if you do want to get these type of pants, you have to import them. Luckily, there are lots and lots of alternatives to these particular pants. Getting some sort of yoga pants or exercise pants or running tights can actually work really well. I like running tights and yoga pants because they're quite stretchy. So if you have to lift your leg up high to climb over a rock, then these pants move with you. The only problem with these pants is that they tend to be kind of cold because they're obviously not trapping a lot of air around your legs. So you might want to get an additional layer just to keep you warm if you are going to be traveling in very cold conditions. Other pants that I've tried, such as the Columbia pants that I tried in my budget backpacking video that I managed to pick up secondhand, and I believe I had a pair of First Ascent hiking pants. Those are all fine. There's nothing wrong with them. You will be able to hike in them, no problem. They just didn't have a lot of stretch. So sometimes if you had to take a really big step, you had to sort of adjust your pants slightly, but this isn't the end of the world. And if you're not planning on doing any sort of super technical terrain, then that's not even going to be a problem. These are one of my favorite pieces of clothing. They are Solomon gloves of some description. I love these gloves because they fit my hands really well. They have reinforcing around the pad of the hand, so if I have to do scrambling, they protect my hand a little bit. And they're also fingerless, which means that I can operate electronics or zippers or any sort of finicky little thing. But if my hands do get cold, they have this clever little pouch on the back, and you just untuck a lovely water resistant breathable mitten. And this is not particularly water resistant. It's maybe more wind resistant than water resistant, but it actually keeps your fingers fairly warm. These are also fairly pricey, but there are alternatives. These are the K-Way Perry mitten, and I believe they actually have like an upgraded version of these now, I think. I bought these a very long time ago, but they also they're fingerless, and they have a mitten attachment on the back. So they work very similarly to the Solomon gloves. They're just quite a lot cheaper, and they're a bit heavier because they're made out of fleece. The one nice thing is that they have this clip. The clip keeps the gloves together when you're storing them, and then when you're wearing them, you can take them apart. But it's really nice because if you're rooting around in your backpack trying to find your gloves, you always find both of them instead of just one. If you're really on a budget with gloves, then plain woolen gloves that you can buy from the hardware store or the 10 Rand store, I literally think these ones cost 10 Rand, will actually work just fine. One of the things that I always wear when I'm hiking, of course, are my shoes and socks. The socks that I use are just regular running socks, nothing particularly special. I, again, wouldn't recommend just purely cotton socks because they tend to get wet and stay wet for a long time, but any sort of sports sock should work just fine. When I started out hiking, I did use hiking boots, but eventually I figured that they were not exactly right for my style of hiking. They were just a little bit restrictive and heavy. So I switched to using trail runners, and for a long time what I did, which I don't recommend people do, is I would use trail running shoes for trail running, and then when they got too beaten up to be used for trail running anymore, I would switch to using them as my hiking shoes and buy a new pair of trail runners to run in. And I did this for quite a long time. Not the best idea. What I do have now is a dedicated pair of hiking shoes, and I use the Solomon Sense Rides, which are great. They've got great grip, and one nice feature of them is they've got the very quick release and do up shoelaces, and that makes your life quite a lot easier when you're taking your shoes off and on. An extra pair of socks I find indispensable. I keep one much thicker pair for sleeping in, and then I take one spare pair of hiking socks, so sports type socks, just in case my feet are getting really cold and I need to switch out my socks to dry ones to try and warm them up. Something that I don't always take with me, but I do sometimes take with me, is a pair of camp shoes. I quite like using these if I am going to be taking a camp shoe. Crocs are very ugly, but they are entirely made of sort of rubberish material, so you can just dry them off with a towel. Then in terms of waterproof clothing, I usually use this First Ascent, I think it's called an X-Trail running jacket. It's a very lightweight waterproof jacket. I normally take that hiking with me because it folds up extremely small and it's extremely lightweight, but it's still very waterproof. This is also quite expensive, but you can use something much less expensive, such as a reusable vinyl poncho. I used this for my budget gear series, And this was completely fine. I will just say with ponchos, if it's very windy, they have a tendency to get blown around. And if you're going to be doing a lot of bushwhacking, where you're going through thick undergrowth, these tend to get snagged on things and can get holes poked in them. If you are really on a budget, then you might want to try a disposable poncho. I have gone on entire hikes where this is my only rain gear. I particularly have done this on hikes where I expected no rain at all, and then it, of course, rained. And it is possible to use a disposable poncho for like a 3-day hike, reusing the same poncho every day. It's not the most comfortable, but it's a piece of plastic, so it's very waterproof and it's fairly warm actually. I do take an extra pair of underpants. I just wear regular cotton underpants and they work completely fine for me. Depending on the length of the trip, I might just take 1 extra pair or 2 extra pairs, and I do wash and dry and rotate them. Where do I even start? The pad that I normally use is this one right over here. It is a Therm Pro Lite Plus women's edition. So the pad itself is slightly shorter, but the R value, which is how warm the pad is slightly higher. I swore by this. It's kind of a foam thing that you also blow up with air, and it's very comfortable and it's very lightweight. I loved it until my budget backpacking project. Okay, I still love it. I do still love it a lot, but I need to make people aware that there are such things as this that exist in the world, and people are going to laugh at you when you buy them.
This is 2/3 the size of this backpack.
It's fine. It weighs nothing.
It's 2/3 the size of Roots.
You get like really thick foam pads. I think this is 2 centimeters or something. And this, the 2 centimeter one, not the thin ones. The thin ones are absolute torture. Don't get the thin ones. But the thick foam mattresses are really cheap. I think this was like 350 Rand or 340 Rand, something like that. And they're so comfortable, just as comfortable as my Therm. You don't have to worry about them getting punctured because it's a piece of foam. You can throw them on top of a rock. It doesn't matter at all. And honestly, the slight amount of bulk that you tie to the outside of your pack and the laughs that you might get from your fellow hikers are totally worth it, because you're saving money, you're super comfortable, and your mat is indestructible. This bulky thing is lighter weight than the Therm Pro Lite Plus Women's Edition. The tents behind me, there's like a green one and an orange one over there. The green one is the Quechua. I still don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a super budget tent, and I have never actually taken it on a backpacking trip. I just put it there as a comparison to the tent that I do regularly take on backpacking trips and have owned for many years, which is the orange one, and that is the Black Diamond Mirage 2-person tent. It's a 3-season tent, but I have used it in all seasons, and it's very serviceable. It's quite lightweight, but it's extremely expensive. The other thing that I have used is a top over there, which is the black thing. The top was actually quite a revelation to me. I think for camping below tree line, it's okay. You have a lot of trees that you can tie it off to, and there are lots of different setup options. Above tree line, I'm still a little bit nervous about using a top as a primary shelter, but tops are definitely an option. They seem intimidating because it's just one single piece of material and you're not in your own nice little housey, but they actually work really well. So at the top here, I have the sleeping bag that I normally take with me on a hike, which is the North Face Blue Kazoo. It's a down sleeping bag, and just underneath it, the black-ish colored sleeping bag, it's got some green accents. I don't know if that's really in the shot. There's the green accents. There we go. The bottom one is a maxed brand from Mr. Price Sport. It's the Senior Cowl -5 degree synthetic sleeping bag. Both of these sleeping bags, I would be 100% fine with taking up above tree line in cold weather. They both perform exceptionally well. The only real difference is that the synthetic one is a bit bulkier and a little bit heavier than the down one, but the synthetic one is significantly cheaper. Then my cook kit. This is the MSR Reactor. It is very expensive. I got this as a gift from my dad, which I'm really grateful for, and I use it all the time. It's quite nice. It has a little handle that flips out. Inside of the pot, I keep my lighter and my gas. And then this is the actual stove part that screws onto the gas canister. And then the pot sits on top of the stove like that. And the reason why it's so efficient is that this bottom part of the pot is a massive heat exchanger and wind shield. So unlike other canister stoves, this canister stove really can operate in pretty adverse weather conditions, including very windy weather conditions, because this heat exchanger acts as such a fantastic wind shield. In addition to being quite expensive, unfortunately, this MSR reactor is also fairly heavy. On the other hand, this little stove is much lighter weight and really cheap. It's a Coughlin's, I think it's called a Coughlin's emergency stove or a Coughlin's solid fuel stove, something like that. It looks like this, and it's got its own fuel stored in it at the moment. I'm being melodramatic. It's not actually that hard to open the stove. These are the little fuel tabs that you use inside here, and then you put the pot on top, you put the fuel tab inside here, you light it, you put the pot on top, sizzles away, etc. I would say that with this stove, if you want actual boiling water, it's going to be pretty difficult to get it with this stove. You're going to need to use a lot of fuel. But if you just want hot water, so hot enough to make coffee or tea, this stove is great. It works fantastically well. The small problem with the stove is that obviously it can suffer a bit in windy conditions. It doesn't have much of a wind shield. So regardless of which of the two stoves I decide to use, I take this pot as my bowl because I like eating on a hike. It is also from Quecha. I'm probably butchering the name. It's got a little handle that folds out like this, so if you put something hot in here, it's nice, you don't have to hold it. The lid comes off. Inside of this pot, it has what is meant to be a bowl, but I use this as my cup and this is my bowl. Then I have a sponge for cleaning everything. I have a spoon. That's the only utensil I take. I don't take anything else. And I have an extra lighter in case the other lighter conks out. In terms of hygiene on a backpacking trip, these are the things that I take. This is a sort of either or situation over here. Depending on how much weight I'm willing to carry, I might take a full micro towel like this one. It's very lightweight. Or if I'm feeling like saving a bit of weight, I just take an extra buff and use that as a towel, which is actually really more than sufficient. Then I've got my little toiletry kit. I take some anti-chafe cream. This is really important, and the type that I use can be used both as anti-chafe cream and as lip balm, which is really useful. I always take some additional sanitary items with me. If you're a woman, just make a habit of having these stashed away somewhere in your regular backpacking kit. This is my toothbrush from back in the day when I thought that sawing off the handle was a good way to save weight. And yeah, this is my toothpaste. It's just a little sample toothpaste that comes from one of those airline packets. I also have a little extra trash bag in here that's opaque in case I have to use the emergency sanitary items. And then packed into a little Ziploc bag, I normally have a few more of these. I have some repackaged wet wipes. So I normally take about 5 to 10 wet wipes per day. Then I also just have a little travel thing of floss and a few little miscellaneous items like a hairband and some earbuds. Having a map of the area that you're going to be hiking is extremely important, but these maps, I'm not even going to take it out. They're massive and they're huge and they're big, and there's no way that you're going to be hiking through the entire area that's shown on this map. So what I do is I take it to my local Postnet or printing shop and I print out just the piece where I'm going to be hiking. You do need to make sure that you include enough of the surrounding area to see landmarks and escape routes that you might need to take. These are the two options that I have for headlamps. This one is a black diamond spot. I think it's a black diamond spot. It's nice because it has a red light function, but it's quite expensive. This is a headlamp from Decathlon, which also has a red light function and was very inexpensive. The only real difference is that the black diamond one is significantly brighter. So if you're going to be running or hiking at night, this one is going to be better. If you just want something for around the campsite, this one is perfectly adequate. Then my actual toilet kit consists of some toilet paper. Make sure that you have enough. A little trowel, which is actually 1/2 of a pair of ice tongs that's been cut off, and it works very nicely as like a mini lightweight trowel. And I also have some hand sanitizer in there. All of my electronics stay in this Sea to Summit waterproof bag. My cell phone additionally goes inside a Ziploc bag just for extra security. And then I always take some type of power bank with me, normally one that's a bit bigger than this. I normally take a 10,000 milliamp hour one with me, and that's because I have to charge my camera's batteries as well. For rubbish, I take a large Ziploc bag that I label rubbish with a permanent marker, and I keep this somewhere accessible. I always take a first aid kit with me, and my first aid kit is kind of a first aid and repair kit rolled into one. It's got a emergency space blanket, some strapping, some plasters, a tiny little pen knife that has tweezers in it, duct tape, some safety pins, so on, and also medication that I take. I have pain pills that work well for me in here on every hike. Then in terms of carrying water, I now use this Camelback 2-liter bladder, but I do always take some extra water bottles just in case this bladder springs a leak. And in the past when I hiked, I did exclusively use bottles. It can work perfectly fine. You can just reuse water bottles or Coke bottles, anything like that. Another thing that I always take with me is sunscreen. It's not a joke, people. Put sunscreen on. I do normally repackage it because these bottles tend to be pretty heavy. I try to keep these two things fairly accessible, particularly this one, which is a can of mace, and this is an emergency whistle. This particular one is kind of nice because it has a little compass built into the top. Not the most reliable, but it works okay. When I talked about my sleep system, the one thing that I did not mention is a pillow. And that is because regardless of which of the two sleeping bags I take with me, I store them in my backpack inside this larger Sea to Summit waterproof bag. It's got a roll top closure. And what I do at night is any extra soft items that I have all get stuffed into this. Unfortunately, as you can see, I don't really tend to carry a whole lot of extra clothing. So this doesn't really make a great pillow, except what I then do is I fill the bag up with air and zip it closed. Let me show you. Obviously, this is not an airtight container. It does tend to deflate as the night goes on with your head on top of it. But I find that on a hike, I normally need to wake up at least once to go to the bathroom, and then I can just reflate it if it's gotten too low. But it does make quite a big difference to my comfort levels when I'm sleeping, just having something to rest my head on. These innocuous little things are just normal shopping plastic packets that I've folded up into triangles. I normally take at least 3 of these with me. One of them is for my dirty shoes, to keep my dirty shoes inside the tent with me without making the tent dirty. One of them will be for my dirty or wet clothing. And the other one is a miscellaneous one, but I often have to use it for things like separating a wet tent fly sheet from a dry tent inner. And speaking of plastic bags, this gigantic plastic bag is what I line the entirety of my backpack with. I stuff everything into my backpack inside of this backpack liner. This is a very thick bag. It's far thicker than a regular rubbish bag, but you could use a rubbish bag in the same way as I've used this. This is the backpack that I use. It is the Deuter Air Contact 50 plus 10 liter SL. I believe that the SL stands for slimline, which just means that these 2 shoulder straps over here are slightly closer together. So it's for people with a bit narrower shoulders as opposed to broader shoulders. Of course, the Deuter Air Contact 50 plus 10 liter SL is a pretty pricey backpack, even if you find it on sale. But there are lots of backpacks out there that are far cheaper, like the Marshall 40 liter backpack, which I bought from Take-A-Lot. I think I got this off of Take-A-Lot. The thing about this backpack is that, unlike the Deuter, it has a fixed torso length. So the shoulder straps and the hip belt are sewn in to this torso section here. And you can't change that torso section at all. The nice thing about the Deuter Air Contact backpack is that, as you can see here, it's got this little thing that's got Velcro on it. And you can undo these shoulder straps and move this up and down these little loops. So the entire shoulder strap section can move higher up if you're taller or lower down if you're shorter. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, then thank you so much and well done. I'm really sorry if this ended up being a very, very long video. I tried to get through everything as speedily as I possibly could. And if you like this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because one day in the distant future, there will be no lockdown and we will be able to hike again, and then I can make some interesting, less lengthy videos perhaps about backpacking trips.
And the world's changed a bit.